1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you live from NASA Community College, 90.3 WHPC. We're also streaming on the iHeart and the iTunes app and so many other places. And of course, this program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So hi there, you know what it is, you know what my name is. You've forgotten, you're rotten. What am I talking about here? It's Rabbi Perl. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This all depends on when you're listening or watching. Hello on the radio, hello online, hello to the world. So go right away to our Facebook, to WHPC's Facebook page or Anshel Perl Facebook page and join in the conversation. And everybody out there on the radio, we really appreciate you joining us every Sunday morning. And many times I meet you in the post office and the locations, and you say you're listening, and I am really honored and humbled by your taking time out on a Sunday morning. You have so much. You could be running at Jones Beach. You could be jumping around somewhere else in the old Westbury Gardens. I don't know where you could be on Sunday morning, and you're here. So thank you so much. I'm going to first start off today by discussing burnout. Burnout. You know what burnout is all about? I'm not talking about cremation, because that's the ultimate burnout. Please hold the applause. I'm talking about burnout and the rationale. I'm going to discuss with you today what is behind burnout. Let me just set the background here. Sociologists and psychologists, economists, and observers of the most recent trends coming out of the let's call it the post-pandemic generation put it high on the list of cultural phenomena that are creating what I would call a massive change in the way people look at their work and their mental and physical health. I was talking to one of our wonderful congregants and talking about a son who left one office, went to another law office, and is not even there 3 months, and already is bored stiff with the job. And around the world, 3 out of 5 workers say they're burnt out. And a 2020 U.S. study puts it this way, that the figure is 3 in 4. 3 in 4 workers are burnt out. There's a book recently came out that talks about the burnout that afflicts an entire generation. It's authored by Anne Helen, and the book is called Can't Even: How Millennials became the burnout generation. And she describes herself as a pile of embers. In Yiddish, we would say, ausgeklappte Shanes. So what exactly is burnout? Well, the World Health Organization describes burnout as syndrome in the 11th revision of the International Classifications of Diseases. In the list of diseases, they list burnout as part of one of these diseases and explains it extremes of activity such as job monotony or chaos, lack of social support, either at work or in one's personal life, and the work-life imbalance. It goes on to say, risk factors include a heavy workload and long hours, feeling little or no control over work, and struggles with work-life balance. Shoy, now you heard it. Wasn't it worth waking up this morning to learn about how burnout is considered in the 11th revision of a classification of a disease in our times? Now, victims describe it as feeling so used up that they feel like a used battery that can no longer be recharged. Burnout is now often referred to as the new normal, and is frequently given as the explanation for a striking new reality for today's younger workforce. So by divine providence, I had this conversation with a father about their son who's exchanged jobs and then is really bored stiff. And then I had a conversation with a neighbor who used to run a landscaping business, tried to give it to his son, and he realized if he left it with his son, who did not want to work too hard, like the father did, would ruin and run the business into the ground. And therefore he went to have to sell it. And he was pointing out that today's younger generation don't have the same work ethic, and they get easily bored and move on. So the term the Great Resignation was coined in the spring of 2021 to take note of a record number of Americans who voluntarily left their jobs. Now, I know what many people are thinking, well, what do I have to work so hard for? The government gives out checks and all the other things, the stimulus checks. I'm going to suggest something much deeper here this morning. The trends that keeps on growing, why is it so special with the younger generation? People came to the United States, people of older generation, they worked hard, they saved. Later on in their life, they, when they retired, they became more relaxed, and then they moved on with things that they couldn't do when they were younger. And why would it be that younger people today, want to be on the top of the ladder right away? I know of a company, for example, it was extraordinary. I mean, 20, 30, 40, 50, delivery trucks. And the gentleman, the older generation who built this business from nothing, he now turns it over to the son. The son right away wants to drive BMWs, and all the fancy cars, and wants to live this, live that. And within a year or so, the business they had to sell, it was going downhill. But why? What is this? Younger generation are great people. So while older generations disdained rapidly the idea of changing from job to job, it's become increasingly common that younger people, let me just share with you, a recent study found that 65% of the generation Zs, as they call them, those born between 1982 and 2004, plan to stay at their jobs for less than a year, compared to 40% across the generations. The Generation Z, according to the data of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, spends an average of 2 years and 3 months at the same job, at the same company. During that time, an additional innovation often makes its presence known. It's called quiet quitting. It is a personal commitment to do only as much as the contractually required, both by time and by effort. And the rationale most often given for the adoption of this Great Resignation, as well as the quiet quitting, as occupational guideposts, is, as you probably guessed, one word. What's behind all of this? Burnout. 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 Now, why am I discussing this morning? Well, there's a striking biblical analogy to our current reality that provides us with what I believe is a powerful insight into both the problem and the resolution. Let me put it in the following manner. Couched in the story of the selection of why Moses became the leader of the Jewish people, the book of Exodus tells us a fascinating detail of the first encounter between God and Moses. God wanted Moses, a shepherd who was tending to his flock, to be aware of his presence. So he performed a miracle. You all guessed. How did God show up in his first encounter with Moshe? Suddenly, what happens? Before Moses' eyes was a burning bush, and yet it was not consumed. From this, Moses was to recognize that it was none other than God appearing to him in the mantle of leadership. If the purpose of the miracle was to prove God's divinity by demonstrating his superhuman power, we could argue making a bush burn and not to be consumed seems to be a rather, how would I call it, a tame illustration of God's mighty majesty and might. Hey, surely God could have done better. Why did he choose the burning bush? I believe that today's burnout has a spiritual source. I know I'm going to lose half of my listeners, and that is the reason for the burnout today It's a response rooted in a lack of purpose. You see, there was another purpose behind this miracle. God was sending Moses a message that would serve him as a guide throughout the years of his leadership. Those who dedicate their life to divine purpose, if there's a divine dimension to our lives, they will never suffer burnout, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's at home as husband and wife. You see, contemporary burnout has a spiritual source. It reflects on the distance we've created between money and meaning. The Great Resignation is a response rooted in a lack of purpose. I can attest to the fact that people who take time out, for example, and spend a few hours in synagogue on the Shabbat, whether it's Friday night and Saturday morning, Shabbos morning, both or one, they bring purpose into their whole week. This past Shabbos, I pointed out an amazing insight that I came across. On Friday night, the custom is, during the concluding lines of L'Chadodi prayer, the custom is to turn around towards the west. You're typically facing east, and this last stanza, you turn around to the west. Now, why would that be? Why would, in the synagogues around the world, would you make that turn? The answer is, we're Friday night, we're facing the ark, we're facing holiness, we're facing what purpose of life is all about, and we turn around and we take a quick purview over the last 6 days. And we say to it, all of my life, all of my Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I'm bringing with me. I'm elevating it. I'm looking back. I'm not embarrassed. I'm going to take a look back. It's behind me, so to speak. The week is behind me. But I take a quick look at it in this environment of the synagogue of the holiness and include it and bring it. So a person who takes that time out brings purpose not only to the Sabbath, but to everything that the person does in the mundane marketplace of working and occupations. The pandemic highlighted the potential for life's brevity. I think all of us, dear friends, if you really want to be open-minded and have a little bit more, have a sense of reality, I think that the entire pandemic period reminded us of the potential of life's brevity. It made clear that possessing more things, I know myself, I came to appreciate what I have. Obviously, we spent more time at home and came to appreciate the simplest things of life, of being home, being with a spouse, looking at the blessings of life. It was like a pause. It was a big pause. It was a pause for purpose. So the pandemic highlighted these ideas. It made it clear that possessing more things, that could be consumed in a moment couldn't possibly be the key to the meaning of life. I want to share with you a rather interesting parable that I read about this, this concept. And I just take a moment to say hello to everybody who is out there, to Jeffrey Hirsch and to Richard Ruttenberg and everybody joining us and posting their comments on Facebook. And, of course, a special welcome to everybody listening on radio as well. There's a famous parable of 3 bricklayers rooted in an authentic story. After the Great Fire of 1666 that leveled London, the world's most famous architect, Christopher Wren, was commissioned to build a cathedral. One day in 1679, this Christopher Wren observed 3 bricklayers on a scaffold. One was crouched, one was half standing, and one was standing tall, working very hard and fast. So to the first bricklayer, this Mr. Wren asked the question, "What are you doing?" To which the bricklayer said, "Oh, I'm a bricklayer, and I'm working hard laying bricks to feed my family." The second bricklayer responded, "Oh, I'm a builder. I'm building a wall." But the third bricklayer, the most productive of the 3, and the future leader of the group, replied with a gleam in his eye, "I'm a cathedral builder. I'm building this building." building this place of this cathedral. So for the first bricklayer, building the wall was a job. For the second bricklayer, it was an occupation. It's my job. For the third bricklayer, it was a calling. It was a calling. Wow. Thank you so much, Richard Rottenberg, for your kind words. A calling, when a person has a calling, it reflects a universal need to matter, to influence, to make a difference in the world around us. Viktor Frankl made this clear in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he wrote how those who survived the Holocaust had one thing in common. They all clung to a purpose or reason to continue to live. Those who survived found some meaning in their painful circumstances. It is the power of purpose, of infusing meaning in our lives, that is the antidote to the contemporary debilitating disease of burnout. And therefore, it was the first message God imbued Moses with to help him become the greatest Jewish leader. Therefore, God showed up in a burning bush. And it's the message that we need to counter the cynicism and the depression and the despair of today's present day burnout. If a person brings up meaning to their life, doesn't matter what job they have. Obviously, we're not saying a person shouldn't change a job and make better and do better and climb the ladder. The American dream, nothing wrong with that. But at every stage of the game, if a person brings purpose and meaning, lives with a purpose and meaning, and recognize that they matter, the burnout or the approach to work would be totally different. I now continue with appreciating the DNA that we all have grown up with. Again, let me put it into a biblical context. We're told this week of meticulously the order of the meal that Abraham offered his guests. And it's recorded in the Torah portion of this week of Vayera. What do we see? We all know that Abraham had just had his circumcision. He was 99 years old. And he yearns to have guests, and he finally has these guests. And what are we told? He gave them cheese and milk, and then he presented them with calf's meat. Now, we have a prominent lawyer in our synagogue, and he asked a very brilliant question. What was the dessert? The Torah does not tell us what the dessert was, but it did bother him. Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. But obviously, all we need to know is what they had in the entree, you could say, or the appetizer. First started with cheese and milk, and then they had the calf's meat. Obviously, you notice how I put the milk first, because this is consistent with Jewish dietary laws. The dairy products must be eaten after the dairy products, but not vice versa. So if you have some nice piece of meat or whatever it may be, chicken, you got to wait at least 6 hours until you have your dairy products. Yet another point is raised among the biblical commentators as to why Abraham even chose to serve his guests these particular items, milk, cheese, and meat, to begin with. What's epis? The choice of meat. And why do we have to know about this? Why did you have to wake up this morning and hear this crazy rabbi give us this detail? How is our lives elevated today to know that Abraham gave his guests thousands of years ago milk and cheese and meat? If it was he gave him a nice shtickle bagel with a schmear, I understand that's important in life. Milk and cheese and meat, enough already. Listen, the choice of meat I can understand. He wanted to give them satisfactory and a nice, we all know when we go to a restaurant, what's going to be the highlight is a nice meal, a heavy meal, some meat. But why, from among all the many possible appetizers, it could have been a salad, it could have been a chveizvos. Why did Abraham decide to give milk and cheese as a prelude to the meat? As the Maisa, come on, a shtickle soup, a fruit cocktail, I don't know, was epis milk and cheese. Now, I know, I was just told that thousands of people couldn't sleep last night waiting for the rabbi to explain this. It's amazing. Even if Abram was compelled, to whatever reason, to serve his guests milk, why does the Torah make a point of sharing this apparently insignificant detail with us? Well, at least let me tell you something. The rule of the thumb in our world is that sharing something with somebody else constitutes a loss for the giver. If I have it and I give it to you, shoin, I've lost it. If you have it and give it to me, you lose it. If you write a check for charity, your checking account is diminished. An exception to this rule is the milk a mother feeds her suckling. As long as the mother continues sharing her nourishing liquid with the child, her mammary glands will keep on refilling. Furthermore, the quantity of milk is usually dependent on her sharing it. The more a mother nurses, the greater the flow of milk her body produces. When she ceases to breastfeed, her inner production of milk, as we all know, ceases. This is one of the deeper reasons why God created nature in a way that infants are nourished by milk. Through this natural process of infant nourishment, the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, teaches a mother is given the opportunity to ingrain within a child's tender consciousness the truth about sharing. The more you give, the more you will receive. Just like the milk that you are now swallowing, my dear child, the more I share it, the more I have it. Very often, guests, particularly if they are strangers, feel uncomfortable staying in somebody else's home and eating another person's food. Abraham, hypersensitive to the feelings of his guests, addressed this awkwardness by offering them milk and milk products at the start of the meal, reflecting our approach towards giving. Giving is like milk. The more you give, the more you get. The greatest gift we can give ourselves is a life filled with love and caring towards other human beings. More than the host does for the guest does for the host. This is true in our marriages as well. When a husband and wife are committed to giving to each other, they themselves are often surprised of how much they receive by the sheer act of giving to somebody outside of themselves. The love we give away is the only love that we keep. Or as Winston Churchill put it, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. There's a lovely story that I shared at our Kiddush about the great Victorian Anglo-Jew Sir Moses Montefiore. Montefiore was one of the outstanding figures of the 19th century. He was a close friend of Queen Victoria and knighted by her. He became the first Jewish person to attain a high office in the city of London. His philanthropy extended to both Jews and Gentiles alike. And on his 100th birthday, the London Times devoted an editorial to his praise. And the Times said he had shown that fervent Judaism and patriotic citizenship are absolutely consistent with each other, with one another. One reflection that was particularly moving to me, someone once asked him, "Sir Moses, what are you worth?" Moses thought for a while and named a figure. "But surely," said the questioner, "your wealth is much more than that." With a smile, Sir Moses replied, "You didn't ask me how much I own. You asked me how much am I worth. So I calculated how much I'd given to charity this year." You see, he said, we are worth what we are willing to share with others. And I want to say thank you to Stephen Epstein, unbelievable, Ashrei, Eitan Kelshevsky, Boker Tov. Eitan Kelshevsky is very busy. He's helping the government of Israel to create, to broker a deal and coalitions over there. Thank you so much for your leadership. And Karen Dumbeck, unbelievable what's going on out there. Let's see now. I'm just taking a quick look at our Facebook, and we can see all the wonderful comments coming in. Thank you so much, and everybody listening to us as well. You know, with this on our minds, our subject matter of burnout and sharing, I want to go into another aspect, which is something we constantly see and hear. You know, when bad things happen to good people, what comes easy won't last. What lasts won't come easy. I've never met a strong person with an easy past. Nothing comes easily in life. If you yearn for sunrise, you got to first endure the night. If you have no winter, the spring won't be so pleasant. Everyone you know is fighting a battle you know nothing about. It seems like nothing great ever came that easily. But why? Why indeed, my friends, does life have to be so hard? As we introduced to the first Jewish Jew, Abraham, as we start the Torah again, God gives us a stunning memo about our destiny that many of us seem to have missed. It holds the key to help us understand why bad things happen to good people. You see, while telling Abraham about the nation that will be his descendants, God tells him that they will be strangers in the land and they will suffer and be persecuted for 400 years. They're going to be in this foreign land, which of course we all know was the Egyptian bondage. And once it's over, they'll emerge with great bounty. This was a prophecy of the Egyptian bondage, which would began the day Isaac was born, on the first day of Passover in the year 2048, and ended on the first day of Passover on the year 2448, which is some 3,335 years ago. So a little piece of Kabbalah helps illuminate this enigma for us. When God first created the universe, he embedded 288 divine sparks within it. When we perform God's will in those specific locations or circumstances in which those sparks are hidden, we elevate them and restore them to God from where they originated. This is much like Michelangelo's description of his efforts to create a beautiful art piece. The sculpture is already complete within the marble block. Before I started the work, it's already there. I just have to chisel away the superfluous material. When our ancestors emerged from their slavery in Egypt, Kabbalah reveals that they had successfully returned 202 of those divine sparks to their source. This is the great bounty which God promised Abraham and his children they would retrieve from Egypt. And ever since then, our task has been to retrieve the remaining 86 sparks that remain everywhere else in the world, in a cosmic, so to speak, game of hide and seek. This is actually the reason why the Torah forbids us to return to Egypt, because all our work has been completed. So any visit there is just a waste of time. In much the same manner, each of us individually have been given a mission for which our souls have been dispatched to the life of this world, the purpose that we talked about earlier on. We didn't show up here just to relax on Jones Beach. We were actually sent here by heaven to achieve a specific mission. Everything that happens to us happens for a reason. A struggle, an illness, a crisis, a divorce, an unemployment, infertility, anxiety, an unhappy marriage were heaven sent so that the person could overcome it with faith and fortitude and shine a light of consciousness that never shone there before. It's interesting to note that God didn't ask Abraham whether he wanted to suffer this way or not. He gave no options, just the courtesy of a heads up. Life won't provide warranties and guarantees, only possibilities and opportunities to turn it into a success. Our specific soul, yours and mine, has a unique mission that only you or I can accomplish in this world. We approach our struggles with awe as we acknowledge them as a trial that our soul specifically must overcome on this earth. Now this story kind of expresses this. Good morning to Stacy Hirsch Lambert. Welcome back from your amazing trip around the world. And thank you so much to Cheryl Varon Kovarsi. In 1977, Dr. Kilshevsky remembers this very well, in Israel was considering a motion to legalize abortion. Spearheading the initiative was Israel's Justice Minister Shmuel Tamir. Hoping to influence Mr. Tamir to align his position with the Torah's ruling on the matter, Israel's rabbinate sent a delegation of rabbis to speak with him. During the meeting, one of the rabbis present there asked permission to share a story. It was Rabbi Perl Levin, who was the son of the famous Rabbi Aryeh Levin, whose unconditional kindness and compassion to others earned him the moniker the Tzaddik, the righteous man of Jerusalem. Rabbi Perl tells a story of a young couple who had approached his father for advice some 50 years earlier. They had recently, his wife had become pregnant, and they were fiercely between them debating whether they should terminate the pregnancy. The husband was a young medical student and didn't feel like he was ready to support a child financially. The wife was passionate about keeping the child safe in her womb. My father, now this is the rabbi speaking to the Supreme Justice Shmuel Tamir, he says, my father, Rabbi Aryeh Levin, captured the heart of the husband as he encouraged him to believe in the success of his family and his future. He eventually persuaded him to agree with his wife to have the baby. I would like to share with you the name of that baby that was saved from being aborted that night. His name, said the rabbi, is Shmuel Tamir, the Minister of Justice. Now, Shmuel Tamir was shocked. He had never heard this story. He never heard it before. And seriously doubted its veracity. He thought if it wasn't written up in the Haaretz newspaper, then it wouldn't be true. Only truth is written in the Haaretz. So he doubted its veracity. Only after speaking with his mother and hearing her validate its details did he accept it. The story had a profound influence on his decision and resulted in countless babies being carried to term and born in Israel. A bitter argument between a couple in the summer of 1922 shaped the heart of one of Israel's most powerful voices half a century later. So nothing happens by chance. Hashem has a plan for every detail of our lives. We must tell ourselves, no matter how hard it is or how hard it gets, I'm going to make it. Nothing is impossible. The word itself says, take the word impossible, split up the word, the first two letters, it becomes I am possible. I'm possible. From impossible becomes I'm possible. Water is the only source of life in this universe. Without it, nothing can survive. A lovely lesson we learn from water is that in order to endure, we must learn to adjust ourselves to every situation and shape. The most important is to learn to find your flow. So when a person asks you, what do? You know the answer is, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. And I'm going to pivot a little bit to an important subject, a conversation. A conversation, my friends. A conversation between a father and a son. This conversation can happen to any mother and son. It could happen between any relationship. Think about the following. Smack in the middle of the story of the Akedah. This is the time when God asked Abraham to offer his son Isaac as an offering. And Abraham is willing to fulfill this request and goes on the journey to Mount Moriah to bring the offering. We find a scene, 2 verses long, which seems superfluous and strange. And what do we read? We read that Isaac says to his father Abraham, that's the words, Vayomer Yitzchak el Avram Aviv. He says, Vayomer, and he says, Avi, father. And Abraham answers, yes, my son. Vayomer Hineni beni. And he says, then he goes on to say, Isaac goes on to say, I see the firestone, I see the wood, but where's the sheep for the burnt offering? And Abraham says, God will see to the sheep for this burnt offering. And they kept on walking. Now, it's a conversation which we might think of kind of trivial, until you realize it's the only conversation we know of in the entire Torah between Abraham and Isaac, who's considered the first Jewish father and the first Jewish son, and therefore must be a very important conversation. Let's listen carefully to what this conversation is all about. Vayomer Yitzchak el Avram Aviv. If you listen carefully to these words, we find a redundancy. It says, Yitzchak said to Abraham, his father. What did he say? My father. Hello? What do you need the extra word? And he said. It's already said, and he said to his father. What does he have to say again? Vayomer again. Why do you need the second time the word, and he said? Also, why does the text have to tell you that Abraham is his father? At this point, we know who Abraham is. Obviously, there are two different conversations here. It's just that the first one got interrupted. First, he says, Yitzchak says to Abraham, his father, and then you wait to hear what he said, but then he says, stops and he says something else. And the something else is that he says, Avi, my father. But that too is strange, because then there's a third time, Vayomer. Again he says, and he actually gets to the question. And what is this question? As we mentioned, here's the stone, here's the firestone, here's the wood, where's the sheep for the offering? Why not just record the conversation in simply, and he said, Father, here is the firestone, where's the lamb? Rarely does a child turn to a father and say just, my father, and end the conversation. Whenever our children turn to us and say, Tati or Mommy, Father or Mother, it's usually a prelude to something else. Hey, Daddy, I need the keys to the car. I need money. I need to talk to you. But here the Torah says that Isaac just said that word as a self-contained conversation, Avi, my father. Let's reflect on this. If you are Abraham and you hear those words, Avi, my father, what would you do? Those are probably the two words that you don't want to hear right now. Why? Why wouldn't you want your son calling out to you? Because what are you doing at that moment? What are you doing on the mountain? What was Abraham doing there? He was going up the mountain because God told him that he's going to give you, that he has to give back his son. And that you're going to sacrifice your son and offer him up at the top of the mountain. It's inconceivable. But this is what God wants. He gives life. He takes life. Life belongs to God. He told Abraham, I gave you this child. I'm not asking you to return this gift to me. Abraham knew that life belongs to God, not to him. And he agrees. So can you imagine, under that circumstances, still, what's one's obligation that a father has towards a child? We all know what we are as parents. Our obligation is to protect, to save. And what is Abraham doing in this moment? He's about to sacrifice his son. So if you are Abraham, how do you do this? You try to avoid thinking about it. You think about anything you can think about. You want to distract. But the one thing you don't want to think about is such a moment of your father-son relationship. But the Torah goes out of its way to tell you that is what they were discussing. So it first tells us Yitzchak speaks to his father and reminds us who Abraham is. It's his father. It's his father. And Yitzchak says to Abraham, his father, he says one word. What does he say? My father. And if you are Yitzchak's father, and you hear those words from your son, what do you want to do now? You want to run away, run down the mountain, you want to have nothing to do with this? Forget it, I'm out of here. And if you don't run away physically, you run away emotionally. You need to shut down. How many people shut down emotionally because the pain is too intense to bear? How many children of Holocaust survivors suffered emotionally because the insane trauma of their parents did not allow them to keep their emotions open and alive? They have been through too much. Today, we know it's one of the brilliant mechanisms of the brain to survive. when the pain is too intense, the brain shuts down certain parts so that we can endure our life and not be overwhelmed. But now we see how Abraham responds at this very moment when he's actually taking his son to become an offering. What did Abraham say? What was his response to the yearning of a son who says, Tati, Avi? He says, Hineni beni, I'm here. Here I am, my son. Right when I want to run away most, I'm here for you. Ask your question. I know who you are. You are my son, and I'm your father. Hineni beni, I'm here, my son. I'm here with my full presence, with my mind, with my heart, with my body, with my soul. I'm here now and forever. And then he continues. Then Yitzhak continues, okay, I see the wood, I see the fire, but where is the lamb? And how does Abraham answer his question? Avram says, Elokim yireh b'ni. God will show us or designate for himself a lamb. What is it all about, my friends? It's at this point that Yitzhak discovers that he may be the offering, as Rashi points out. But why is Abraham being ambiguous? The answer is, Abraham doesn't know what's going to be on the top of the mountain. Doesn't make sense. God promised that there would be a great nation coming from him. But here he is also telling him to come up and to offer up his son at the top of the mountain. None of this makes sense. What's going to happen to the top of the mountain? I don't know. But I know one thing, says Abraham. I know that God has a job, and I have a job. God is going to figure out what is going to happen at the top of the mountain. I don't know what the lamb is. Maybe the lamb is you, maybe not. That's up to God. But there's something that's up to me. What's up to me? And that is Hineni b'ni. What's up to me is to be your father at this moment and forever. Abraham didn't run away, not physically, not emotionally. What's going on to happen at the top of the mountain? I have no idea. I trust God. He will figure it out. My brain can't make any sense out of this. What I do know is, I'm your father. I'm here for you. Hineni. Abraham could shut down his heart to his son. He could turn off to Yitzhak and say, I have nothing to do with him. My allegiance is to God. Or Abraham could just say, God, I have nothing to do with you. This is crazy. My allegiance is with Yitzhak. What do we learn from this? Abraham's uniqueness is that he remained present in life's paradoxes. He's fully present for his Yitzhak, even as he still remains fully present for God. At the top of the mountain, God's going to figure out. Until then, I'm here. Not just for God, I'm also here for my son too. Doesn't make any sense. That's God's problem. He will figure it out. I am here, Hineni. It's fascinating that the Akedah begins with the word Hineni to God. God calls out to him, Avram, Avram. What did he say? Hineni, here I am. At the end of the story, the angel calls out not to touch the child. And what is Abraham's answer then? Hineni. But it's in between these two Hinenis, there's one more. And that's when he says, Hineni b'ni, I'm with you, my son. For Abraham, the two never undermine each other. If I really say Hineni to God, if I know how to put my ego to the side and ask what God wants at this moment, it means I know how truly to also say Hineni to my child and ask what my child needs at the moment, even if I'm so much pained and so much in consternation. We all experience this in our own lives. When we encounter the pain of life, especially pain of children, we can shut down. We can sometimes think it's easy to navigate life that way. Sometimes people can even use God or the religion or their values or their ethics, their faith, their convictions as a justification to detach themselves emotionally from their children. Abraham steps in and says otherwise. If we really say Hineni to God, if we're really there, we also know how to say Hineni to our children. Because you know how to go beyond your brain, beyond your ego, and beyond your rational way of thinking, how things have to be and how things have to work out. Abraham knew how to do this because he understood that the deepest truths of life can't always be figured out rationally. Things don't always make sense. Life is not a mathematical puzzle. It is an encounter with infinity, which transcends my expectations, my understanding, and my way of seeing the world. You are trying to serve God and do the right thing. You're trying to love your child and be there for him or her, but your soul is rattled with contradictions. How can I be both? Your psychic wants to do one of two things: detach from your child, let the anger and pain destroy the bond and the intimacy. Or conversely, maybe we just shut down to God. Stop caring. Just let go of everything you believe in and care for. Maybe let emotional anarchy take over. So Abraham's greatness was that in the very same moment that he said, "I'm with you, God," Hineni to God, with all of his heart, he also said Hineni to his child with all of his heart, and the two did not undermine each other. On the contrary, one inspired the other. That's why at the end of the story, his love for Isaac and his love for God have grown infinitely stronger. And that is why Isaac became the child who will create an eternal nation, a nation that will have the courage to say Hineni to God and to loved ones, a nation that remains fully present emotionally in every journey of life, knowing that our souls are capable of channeling the music of paradox that we often see in the world, especially in our times. I want to share this story again, even at the expense of repeating it, because this story I mentioned at the conclusion of my Shabbos morning sermon. We're talking about Miss André Goulin. She was 18 years old, a Catholic-born teacher, just embarking on her career when Hitler Yamach Shemai conquered Belgium in May of 1940. One day, several Jewish students arrived at school with their notebooks held tightly against their chests. They were trying to hide the yellow stars sewn on the uniforms in accordance with the Nazi decree. To lessen their shame and fear, Miss Goulin declared that all of her students, Jewish or not, would wear aprons over their uniforms. If only in the confines of a classroom, a yellow star, its presence or absence, was no matter. Shortly thereafter, Miss Goulin's Jewish students began to disappear. They had been rounded up, bound for deportation to Auschwitz. At that very moment, she recalled, I said to myself, "What can I do? What can I do?" André joined the underground and, using the code name Claudia, escorted Jewish children to farms, to convents, to boarding schools, and a host of homes of host families where she and her colleagues in the resistance had arranged for them to live under assumed Christian identities. From 1942 until the Allied liberation of the Belgium in September of 1944, André saved 400 Jewish children. In an interview, André recalled that there were roundups every night. I had some addresses, and I saw it as a race between myself and the Gestapo, who would get to the family first. Miss Goulin often posed as a mother, holding the hand of one child who was not her own, and pushing another in a buggy, striding forward under the gaze of the German soldiers. The youngest of the children she rescued were newborns, 5 or 6 days old, lifted from the arms of their mothers in hospital maternity wards and taken to places where they could be safe, or at least safer, until the Nazi danger passed. It is incredible. Her underground group worked with a doctor who would inform them when a Jewish woman had given birth and wished to surrender the child for safekeeping. In 1989, she was recognized by Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem, as one of the righteous among the nations, an honor bestowed on Gentiles who assumed extraordinary risks to save the lives of Jewish persons during the World War II. At a profoundly emotional reunion of hidden children in 1998, Andre spoke to those she had saved. And she said the following: "You placed your little hand in mine. The other hand held on to a large suitcase with all the treasures prepared with tears by your mothers, and we left on our journey. For a long time now, I wanted to say to you thank you for having taught me the immeasurable stupidity of racism. This will remain with me for all my life. No other work has filled me with such pride. Imagine what this represented for a 20-year-old woman to go to sleep at night and think, another 5 children saved, another 5 children spared deportation. I loved you then so much. I still love you as much today." In the May of this year, my dear friends, this wonderful human being, Andre, passed away at the age of 100. She taught us how to say Hineni to each and every child in the face of horrific evil and death. She can teach us all how to say Hineni on our own lives, for our children, and for every other child that we come across. I want to say hello to Rosemary Hoffman, joining us on Facebook at WHPC, to Miriam Odile David, thank you, shalom, Linda Zellickson, and Lavana Lichter, and all the wonderful comments that you can find, dear friends, if you go to my Facebook page at Rabbi Perl, and you will find all this written over there. Thank you so much for everybody. Now, you know, one of the things that I often I take a tremendous interest in is recovery. And allow me just to share a little thought about, you know, a lot of people go through a lot of issues, you know, with addictions, etc. I remember when I was young and I thought I could do something. Everyone else around me did not believe that I could do it. All my friends doubted me and may even have questioned my own ability to succeed at the task. Eventually I gave up because I did not see the success of a possibility. In Parshas Va'era, Abraham and Sarah are visited by angels who come to tell them at 100 and at 90 years old, respectively, they were about to have a child. Abraham laughed with joy, while Sarah initially laughed with disbelief. After I'm old, my husband is old. According to Rashi, Sarah did not believe that she could still physically have a child. Having seen how she had changed and become older, she was dismissive of the news. She also endured years of barrenness, during which her maidservant Hagar had had a child with Abraham. So it made sense to Sarah to give up hope and did not believe the news. This is similar to someone in recovery from addiction. Many times, all the signs that the person has seen and experienced in their life led him to feel hopeless. He feels like he has gone down another dead-end road and nowhere to turn. The person did not feel that in any way he can find sobriety. Every avenue seems closed, and every time he tries to get sober, he experiences failure. Just as Sarah no longer had physical signs that would make it possible to have a child, the addict, too, sees physical signs in his or her life that convince them it's beyond help. Things such as loss of relationships, a job, a house, or money, or perhaps health, God forbid. Many times when an addict finally meets someone who is in recovery, he listens with a sense of loss and impossibility at the notion of becoming sober. But as step 2 of Alcoholics Anonymous notes, my friends, we all know that we came to believe a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. That's right. Something greater than ourselves is able to perform open miracles and lead us to the path of sobriety. If the person would trust that Hashem is there for him and for her, and believe that sobriety is possible, open miracles would occur. And just as Sarah was able to have a child when she was old, after years of barrenness, so too Hashem gives all of us struggling with any addiction the opportunity to find a new life, new hope as they walk in the path of recovery. My friends, have a wonderful day. Have a good week. Stay well. Stay focused on the purpose. There won't be boredom and burnout. Have a wonderful week. Thank you all for joining us.